Hi everybody, welcome to another video. This one is on the Wider4, but before I start I just wanted to say thanks to everybody. We've reached 2,000 subscribers, so a bit of a milestone for me. I didn't think we'd get that far, but you know, I know it's not huge compared to some, but you know, it's 2,000 and I'm quite proud of it. So thanks for everybody for all your subscriptions. So what we got, as I say, we got the Wider4. Now I wanted to compare it to the Kiwami 4 because they're very similar price, quite similar guns, but I just wanted to show you the Wider4L. Now I've done a video on the Wider4L. I'll put a link in the description. I've got to cover my face up, A, because it's not exactly pretty, and B, because the camera wants to focus on it all the time. But if you can see the difference between the 4L, which is this one here that's shaking, is quite marked compared to the Wider4. So the 4L has a 4 split tip, a completely different cap with much larger air holes, designed to run at virtually half the pressure, 1.1 bar or 16 psi instead of 29 psi or 2 bar. So this is designed to run around about 2 bar. So what I also wanted to show you was the Kiwami 4. Now the Kiwami 4 will be a 4J cap. This has a J2 cap on it, the Wider4. You can see there's very little difference. The only difference there is actually in the air holes. The air holes in the Wider4, which is this one here, shaking up and down, are a little bit closer, slightly different angle, and slightly smaller than this one, the Kiwami 4. Otherwise, they're very similar. They look more or less the same. Now, the actual tips, the bodies are the same, apart from the obviously the markings, but the bodies are actually the same. And you'll see also, again, I've got to cover up my face for obvious reasons, the tips are actually marked differently, but they're exactly the same. So as long as you've got a 1.3 tip in either, that they are fully interchangeable and exactly the same. As I say, so are the needles and so are the gun bodies. So the only real difference, apart from the colouring, is the actual cap. I don't know whether I can get it any better. Oh, that's a bit better. Yeah, you can see the differences there. You see the air holes in the one furthest away from you, which is this one here, which is the Wider4. They are closer together and they're slightly smaller. But anyway, that's the main difference. As I say, thanks everybody for subscribing. And now we do a bit of spraying and see what the Wider4 spray is like. And I will get a video up of these two together, back to back, same panel, everything the same, so that you can make your own mind up which one's better. But I can tell you now, they do spray quite differently from each other. Okay, off we go. We'll watch the rest of the video. So you've seen the physical difference. What I actually like to use, well, they're quite different. In fact, the physical difference is relatively small compared to the difference when you actually use these, the Wider4 compared to the Kiwami 4. So looking at the Kiwami 4, which is obviously what this video is about, what you get is you get a smaller pattern. So the size of the pattern is, from top to bottom, is physically smaller, but it's much wetter. It's a bit wider, but it's much wetter. So for people that like, I mean, we keep saying, or I keep saying I&O these days because of what SATA did, I suppose, with their I&O versions. But if you prefer an O pattern to an I pattern, then this will suit you better, I think, than a Kiwami 4. The Kiwami 4 is a really good gun, especially value for money wise, and these things, as I was saying in the introduction, these things are actually the same price or thereabouts. So there's no saving to be made by going for a Kiwami 4 or a Wider4, as long as you don't go for the L version, which, as I said, is quite a bit more money. So the standard Wider4, as I say, gives a much wetter pattern. So today we're using it for base coat. It's a bumper or fender, as you say in the US. This takes about 600 millilitres of base coat, and it's on a primer base, so it's a good base. So we can put you know, a good amount of material on from the start, and this gun lends itself nicely to that because of its wet pattern. It does actually cover, the coverage is really good. So you can just get on with it and do the job. Make sure when you're doing this base coat stuff, make sure that your substrate, what you're doing, your prime surface, is nice and clean. And by that I mean make sure that you've done a degreasing of it. With this, it's actually a plastic fender, as most of them are these days. So I actually use an alcohol and water solution. It's about 8, it depends on the weather, but it's about 20 degrees, 21 degrees today. So I use 20% water and 80% IPA alcohol, and I find that cleans really well, degreases really well, but it also takes away any most of the static that's in the bumper. Because with a lot of plastic stuff, you can get anti-static guns that you point and shoot and it takes the static away. They actually work quite well, but they're quite expensive. I haven't got one. So if I'm doing something that's plastic, and it's not, most of the time the stuff I do is metal, if you're doing something that's plastic, I find that if you use alcohol and water, it tends to take away a lot of the static. And you've got to be careful of the static, because if you're using, especially if you're using solvent based paints, you've got to be careful that you don't create a spark. Really, just it's pretty unlikely to happen, but it could. So if you put your hand and arm near the bumper, you'll see the hairs raise up. So that's the sort of thing I'm meaning, really. So back to the gun. Sorry to waffle on a bit, but I thought I'd mention it. Back to the gun. As I say, if you like a wet pattern, this is the gun for you. Otherwise, everything else is the same. The feel, everything is exactly the same, as I explained in the introduction. Now, this is about base coat, but I have used this gun for clear coat as well, and I really like it for clear coat. I really liked it for base coat, and I really liked it for clear coat. And I think it is that O type pattern, which I am discovering that I think I probably like more. Whether you get a better finish with this or with the Kiwami 4 is open to debate, really. I think it depends what you're doing. I think I prefer it over the Kiwami 4. Not to say that the Kiwami 4 isn't a good gun, because you'll see in my other videos it really is a very good gun. But this, I just think the way this sprays, for me, just takes it. It just makes it a bit better. And by that I don't mean the results are better, I mean it's a bit nicer to use, better for the user to use if you're, if you like that kind of gun. Reliability wise, again, I will mention it. I buy these things from Painting Tools Japan. I will put a link in the description. But what you'll find is that if you do get a problem, you're going to have to send it back to Japan, because at the moment these things are only available in Japan. You couldn't go into your Iwata dealer in Spain or Germany or wherever you may be. I'm in the UK, and ask for one, because they wouldn't have one. They're available purely in Japan at the moment. Presumably that will filter through, because they are a replacement for the W400, so presumably they'll filter through to the stock in Europe and the Americas and the Australasian market, etc. But as far as I know at the moment, they're only available in Japan and the Asian markets. But as I say, that will change, and it's a direct replacement for the W400. The Kiwami 4 is a direct replacement for the W400 Bel-Area, so they are different. They're actually marketed, the original W400 and this, the Wider 4, is actually marketed as a industrial coating gun. The Kiwami 4 is marketed more as an automotive refinishing gun, and the Wider 4 is, as I say, marketed as an industrial coating gun. But don't be put off by that. Don't think that you're getting an industrial gun that can't give you a good finish, because it can give you a really, really good finish. You'll see here, actually, I'm putting some heat into this bumper. What I wanted to point out, because a couple of people have mentioned it, what I wanted to point out is you'll see me putting heat. This isn't to actually dry the paint. What it is, it's to put heat into, in this case, a bumper, but it's to put heat into the object before you apply the base coat. Now it's 20 degrees anyway, so it's literally to bring it up to about 25 degrees Celsius, because it keeps the, especially with a pattern like this, the base coat is wet enough to go onto a deer properly, but it actually means that it goes off, it dries quicker, and that means you can get your next coat on quicker. You stand less chance of getting dust nibs, because if the paint's dry, obviously there's going to be no dust, because if something drops on it, it will just blow off when you just give it a quick blow before you actually do the next coat. So it's quite beneficial for it to be as warm as you can get it. But one of the things I was going to say is, if you're using a heat gun and you're on metallic paint, be careful, because you need to let that paint dry a certain amount before you go on with your heat gun. Because what you'll do is, if it's too wet and you get that heat gun, I try and get it nice and close, basically to save as much energy as I can, get as much heat as quickly as I can into whatever I'm doing. But by doing that, because obviously the heat gun actually has a draft, a wind coming through it, it can move the metallic. You will literally see it if you try it on something that's very wet. You'll see the metallic laying over on side to side, and you can create like little a motley effect if you're not careful. So wait for the metallic to dry to a certain extent, and then put a bit of heat in it. So you're trying to put some heat in it before you apply, rather than straight after, if that makes sense. Because these things are edited, it often looks like I've just sprayed it and then I'm putting heat on it. It's not normally the case. Normally I leave it for a little while and then I put heat on it, but it'd be quite boring for you to just watching paint dry, basically, wouldn't it? So that's a thing to watch. And with something like this, because it actually puts out quite a lot of material, the base can get quite wet. Obviously you can cut it down if you want to, but one of the joys of this is the coverage of it. It's actually very good. It actually puts out, according to Iwata, it puts out 160 millilitres in a 1.3 form at 2 bar. Now their pressure ranging is anywhere from 2 bar to 2.9 bar. But at 2 bar, which is what the Kiwami 4 is designed for, it puts out in 1.3 160 millilitres of material, and that's compared to 220 millilitres of material for the Kiwami 4. So this gun actually puts out less material than the Kiwami 4 for the same size tip, and you would think you would notice that, but you really don't. And I think that, as I say, that's because of the wetness of the pattern. This seems to provide just as good coverage. This is for base coat, but I have used it for clear coat as well, and the same is said for that. And I think that's one of the reasons I really like it, because you do get a good finish. You get a nice wet finish if that's what you want, which is very, very good for clear coat. But you're also not using loads of material, because with the big eye patterns, I think you can waste a fair bit of material. Whereas with the closer, smaller patterns, I think you waste less. Nothing scientific in that. It's purely just the way I'm thinking about it and the way I'm looking at it. But that's what I think. I think that's one of the reasons. Anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching as always. Bye bye.